Hey, what's up again, everybody? It's Robert184, 2Rs, 2Bs, GundamReviews.net, and episode 47, Sunday night. Gundam Age is really nearing the climax. Character arcs are being resolved left, right, and center for better and for worse, of course, as this is a Gundam series, and kill 'em all is the name of the game since day one. So let's get right to it with the best characters, mobile suits, and scene of the week. So starting with characters, something that I probably wouldn't have guessed going into this episode, but Kyo Asano today really struck me as sort of finding that perfect balance between still being an active protagonist, still sticking true to his obviously pacifist and let's get along roots as we've seen develop over the course of the series, which I think they've done a good job of, while at the same time still being human. And when his friends and even his enemies and when people that he cares about are dying and being killed, there are times where he won't kill his enemies, but there are other times where he will, and yet at the end, he still found that perfect balance that seems to come across as being I'm using the word balance a lot here, but I think that they found the right mix and that we as viewers have a pretty good idea of exactly where Kyo stands, exactly how he feels, and I think that they've pulled him to the point over these last 17 or so episodes where he's been the protagonist, that we can understand exactly why he did and how he did it, and I think that he's finally emerged as his own character as of his actions at the end of this show. And speaking of another Asano who could have come off a lot worse in this episode, Flit actually seemed to have a good one. In control, ostensibly, of the diva, he had Captain Moe sitting beside him, and as you'll see at the end, there was a key crunch scene, and of course we've all seen the result by now. But in the end, you expect with Flit and his kill-em-all attitude, and especially the win-at-any-cost thing, that he would not have hesitated to pull the trigger, and you thought that he might bully Captain Moe or tell her that she's got to do it, or just sort of reminded her of what she has to do, but instead he was still there right up to the end trying to check and seeing what else could be done if anybody was in the vicinity. He could have come across as a much bigger jerk than some people are already taking him to be, but instead he did the right thing, and that put all of the emphasis on the characters that mattered. As we are looking at the star-crossed lovers, and I don't even know if that's the right term since they are on the same side. However, at the end, they ended up definitely on the wrong side. Well, both on the same side of the decision, I suppose. In the end, Captain Moe has stepped up to the plate. Of course, they set her up this way, as people pointed out in my earlier episodes when I said she's going to probably be one of the worst Gundam captains. We haven't seen a lot of Gundam captains have to make such horrible choices as she did. We've seen it in Seed and things like that, but when you're killing a former friend who has become an enemy, it's a little bit different than what we saw here. She had Flit beside him. Flit didn't have to say anything. She stepped up to the plate. And why did she do it? Well, it was because of the knowing smile from that man right there, Sarek. Both of these are, of course, going to be co-characters of the week, let's say. In the end, Captain Moe, you can imagine that if there is a movie at the end of this and they do a fourth generation, you can imagine that she's going to be the wise old experience hand, and the kind of thing that when you see Bright No in episode 5 of Unicorn, we all know how he got there, and now we can see where she'd be, and you can't wait to see Kyo-san respect her the same way we did. And what more can you say about Sarek? I mean, he stepped up to the plate. He had big shoes to fill in when you think about Wolf and all the other cool senpais along the way in all the Gundam series, but especially Wolf in this one. In the end, he told Kyo to stay on his toes. He kept the captain in line. Basically, he was the only one on the diva who seemed to be doing their job. And in the end, he saw his wingman get blown up last week, and he knew that even though he was in that situation, that he had to make the right call for the team, and boy did he take one for them. On to Mobile Suit of the Week, and I gotta tell you that I was pretty excited at the end of the last episode, where it looked like we were going to have a Season 1 finale type villain from Gundam 00 rush out, as we got to go see Godom. What did he already have? He had a Gomel at the beginning, and then he was in a purple Damascene kind of thing, and in the end he came out in this amazing ball that had this spiky kind of Gurren Lagann thing going on at the beginning, or at the front, which he used to great effect at the beginning until he ran into that man, Sarek, who was definitely able to put him down, and I kept waiting for this golden egg to transform and reveal a very cool mobile suit in the end. And as Sarek shot him up and he just waited for him to die, and he didn't, and instead it was just the arms came out. So my winner of definitely not Mobile Suit of the Week has to go to this one, the Gerdolin or whatever it is, because that was certainly a waste of an egg. Another mobile suit that had a decent showing in this episode, although again it was just to set up the awesomeness of the heroes, had to go to Xanard Zamdrag, and we already seen that Xanard is going to be quite an interesting character, both before this and after this because of the result of the battle. But his Zamdrag, it's certainly right up there in terms of the second tier of the Vegan mobile suits after Zahard. He's got to be the #1 villain there. unless we're going to see Ezelkant in another mobile suit at the end. It's unfortunate that probably the fact that it requires a lot of plastic may mean we never get it in plastic model form, but nonetheless, it certainly played a big role in the end of the episode when we got to see... Can there be any doubt whatsoever in terms of the best MS of this week? It has to go to the Gundam Age FX, where a few weeks ago they had set up the fact that it's got an FX burst, and Kyo said, there's no reason that I'm going to use it. I'm here to save people, I'm not here to kill people. And instead, we got to see this thing go full Wolverine, full Porcupine, and these sea funnels where you'd think that you'd have enough with, what, 8 plus 6, and all of a sudden you're going to add 3 down to the legs, which it's so cool, I have to point out. Looking at the high grade, whose review is coming up tomorrow, you can see that it's going to have all sorts of extra places where you can put on some extra ones. Hopefully some extra large ones are going to be released, otherwise I suppose you could just buy more and put on more of the 6. But let's get right to it. We had Trans Am in Gundam 00, we've seen all sorts of super modes and hyper modes in G Gundam. The fact that it changed colors and changed colors very well, and all of a sudden just added a whole bunch more firepower, just made this guy obviously a worthy successor. And I think Bandai sort of got a clever idea here, where with the previous, the Age 1, 2, 3, they've done the 3 wares, so they get to sell 3 of them. With this one, the fact that they've already got the plastic mold set up for it means that we will probably be getting a re-release in Trans Am-ish dark blue colors, or whatever kind of effect that they use, because boy did it look great when he went all blue, all green, and we got to see Kyo rushing through space as the FX did as well. Definitely stepped into the title of lead Gundam, and you wonder that he's going to be using the burst against who, whether it's Sid, Zayhart, or anybody else. Definitely do not want to get in his way if Kyo happens to forget his humanity at the end. But in terms of mobile suit, this guy stepped up and is now going to be one of my favorites, I think. For Scene of the Week, starting things off on a lighthearted note, early in the episode you had Captain Moe sitting in her chairs on the left, as she should be, and we had Flit on the right. And whatever she did, she gave an order or she said something funny, and in the end we had Flit give her the funniest set of eyes that you could interpret in various different ways. As he looked at her, or maybe he was just looking at her moe-ness. Nonetheless, it was a lot of fun before things got deadly serious. Because as I alluded to earlier, they had to set it up that it seemed from the very beginning Sarek was going to be doomed this episode, as we got to see more action out of him than we have the whole series so far. Nonetheless, we got to see his upper body blown onto the enemy flagship, or at least one of their larger ones, and with the supermassive photon cannon from the Diva ready to blast, and everybody wondering why they haven't. Well, it was because Sarek, who had just beaten up a pretty impressive looking egg in a very impressive senpai-worthy way, his body was there and there was nothing that they could do to get out of it. We even got to see Albright doing his best along with the wingman, who lost his buddy last week, and nonetheless, we had Flit trying to do the right thing, but in the end, Captain Moe, with Sarek's help, made the call, and she decided to fire the laser and blow up both her potential love interest, the only person who's really believed in her and sent her along the right path, and probably their best hope just in terms of leadership out there for the mobile suits. Not to mention on the personal level, it hurt on a lot of levels for everybody involved, and that is the kind of thing, it's right up there with some of the deaths I'd say in Gundam. We've seen people die heroically at the hands of the bad guys, but seeing them being sacrificed by their friends and or potential lovers certainly takes things to a new level. Love these characters or not like them, you may not feel they're as developed, but nonetheless, it was certainly a moving scene, or so I thought. Which absolutely would have been Scene of the Week in almost any other episode in any other Gundam series. Nonetheless, there was something even cooler at the end. The fact that that came sort of earlier in the episode just set it all up. We got to see Dean, and I really like the way that they handled this. We saw him launch last week, and I thought it was a Kronos. Nonetheless, it was a Kronos paint scheme on the Zadora, as people pointed out. The Jill's Bane looking fantastic, as we got to go all Zetus R. It used to belong just to the commanders, and all of a sudden it gets passed on to everybody else. Looks like the Zadora, which is such a great mobile design, we get to see the same idea as it became an X-Rounder type. I liked that Dean was part of a crew and not just this unique guy flying around in a Kronos kind of thing. This was the way to do it, and nonetheless, they didn't drag it out over the course of a lot of episodes. Kyo, he wouldn't kill an enemy earlier, Sarek scolded him. He had the chance, and he certainly wasn't going to go kill Dean, even if it meant him dying himself. And nonetheless, as he chopped off all of his legs, and all of a sudden Dean said, "I want you to take care of my sister's ashes and put them in all the most beautiful places." And we got to wonder, all of a sudden Dean starts to blow up, and you've got to wonder why. And that's going to come all down to that man back there, Xanard in his Zamdrag, who will cut through anything as he decides that he's going to go deal with the Gundam himself. This was not the scene of the week. This did not overdo or outdo Sarek's death, but what came up certainly did. But it was the FX Burst, which was accompanied by some pretty good music, not quite up there with Trans Am Burst that we got to see in the end of the second season of Gundam 00. Nonetheless, it was certainly impressive. The colors changed, the bits came out, they got bigger. The combination of both the fighter inside, thinking of Domon and the G Gundam, or the Shining thing kind of thing. We got to see Kyo fly out, and this mobile suit looked fantastic as we saw Kyo rage. And like I said earlier in the character section, I think that's when he really stepped into his own. However, at the end, he spared him yet again, which again is sort of keeping with him character, that even with the FX Burst, he didn't go totally off the deep end. Nonetheless, the music playing, the reveal of this extra special move for the final Gundam, that is exactly what you want to see in a Gundam series, and I can't wait to see how many more times we're going to see it before the end of the show. And finally, wrapping things up, the only thing that I'm left with is just how many more plotlines, characters, mobile suits, how many more things are there to wrap up. I'm glad they started this climax early with the launch sequence last week or the week before. This episode, one of my big complaints, I suppose, is that there wasn't enough on the Zeon split, or I shouldn't even call them Zeon, but you get the idea with the Vegans and the UE and the generic bad guys that we always get to see. The infighting here, we got to see Zehart yell at him over a hologram at Xanard. Xanard said, well, blah, 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 and he just went off and tried to deal with the FX the best he could. The fact that he's still alive, though, means that there's more to play out with this. It certainly would have been a chance for things to get wrapped up. Nonetheless, we're still going to have the Vegans fighting themselves and the Earth forces as we move on. But something I really liked was Zehart's determination at the end, as he said, I am going to create Eden no matter what the cost, and that's just setting everything up right. But if you think about it, we've got Asim and his arc still to deal with. Flit, and what's going to happen to him? Is he going to have any epiphanies, or is he going to come to any sort of realizations? Not a lot of time left to get there. So much to wrap up, so many battles, which means it's only going to get better. So why don't you let me know what you thought of this episode, and what you think is going to be coming up in the episodes to come. Can't wait to see this climax, so stick around every Sunday night, and we'll see you back here. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye. I wonder if Bandai's premium online shop is going to give me a chance to be green with envy that it's Zehart who gets to do all the subordinate zoning around here.